The movie begins with James Burns, a young man whose first day in prison spirals out of control when a guard restrains him after a bus altercation. James was incarcerated for offenses like illegal firearm sales and drug possession. In the past, his mother, Tracy, had tried enrolling him in school, but he was rejected due to his troubled history. Despite his efforts to change, James was disheartened by the repeated rejections. Under house arrest, he heads to a local store for milk, where he crosses paths with Crystal and Drew, who are in the middle of robbing the place. Accidentally getting involved, James befriends them. Lieutenant Fulton, the prison warden, warns James to avoid stirring up trouble. However, James frequently ends up fighting in prison, usually defending fellow inmates from bullies. The film flashes back to James' criminal past, where Crystal introduces him to Barrick, who recruits them for drug dealing. One night, Tracy finds alcohol in James' room and confronts him about his future, but in anger, James cuts off his ankle monitor and storms out. Back in the present, James narrowly escapes an attack by Guillermo and his gang, though his friend Chris is seriously hurt in the process. Lieutenant Fulton blames James for the altercation and sends him to solitary confinement. Another flashback reveals James working as a getaway driver for Rock. When one job goes wrong, James takes charge, impressing Rock, who rewards him and offers a permanent role in his operations. In prison, James notices Conrad, an inmate rumored to be a violent cop killer, but Conrad keeps his distance despite James' efforts to connect. Flashbacks show James and Crystal robbing a convenience store, where the nervous cashier Sarah suggests they take cigarettes and liquor. In the present, James' mother visits him, urging him to stay out of trouble to shorten his sentence. Inspired by her words, James starts writing poetry to cope with prison life. After sharing one of his poems with Conrad, the hardened inmate softens and encourages James to continue writing. James promises to protect Chris after he recovers from his injuries. In another flashback, James and Drew are sent by Rock to collect a debt, which leads to a confrontation with bodyguards. Enraged, James breaks a car window and discovers a stash of weapons, which he steals. Feeling newfound happiness with Sarah, James plans to leave his criminal life behind. However, when he returns to Rock's headquarters, Rock forces him into one last job, selling the stolen weapons for cash. Needing money to start a new life with Sarah, James reluctantly agrees. In the present, James tries to get Chris moved to a safer cell, but Lieutenant Fulton refuses. The next day, Guillermo provokes James, but he manages to keep his temper in check. Meanwhile, Chris' sentence is extended due to his involvement in James' earlier fight, leaving James guilty about his friend's fate. A flashback shows James and Sarah falling in love, with James determined to leave crime behind. However, Rock manipulates him into staying for one last illegal deal. That night, as James and Drew wait for a buyer, a gunfight erupts, drawing the police's attention. Though they escape, the authorities trace Rock's car, leading to Rock and Crystal's arrest. James, desperate, goes to Sarah's house and begs her to leave town with him, but she refuses, urging him to face the consequences. Heartbroken, James is eventually caught and sent to prison. In the meantime, Lieutenant Fulton faces legal repercussions for failing to protect Chris, who ultimately takes his own life. Devastated by his friend's death, James spirals into emotional turmoil and starts a fight in the yard. Conrad steps in, reminding James of his upcoming trial and urging him to stay focused. At his trial, James expresses deep remorse for Chris' death and regret for his past choices. Expecting a harsher sentence, he vows to change and leave his life of crime behind. Moved by his sincerity, the judge reduces his sentence. James serves the rest of his time with good behavior and is eventually released. Before leaving, Conrad warns him that if he ever returns to prison, he'll kill him. Outside, James reunites with his mother and sister, happy to be free. He finds work as a janitor and, when approached by old friends for illegal deals, he declines, determined to stay clean. James later goes to visit Sarah, only to discover she has moved on and is now engaged to someone else. Though happy to see him and proud of his transformation, Sarah has started a new life.